Needs assessment and overview. A needs analysis or assessment is a formal systematic process of identifying and evaluating training that should be done or the specific needs of an individual, a group of employees, customers, suppliers, students, etc. So you may be wondering what the purpose of a needs assessment is. A needs assessment helps determine the current state of performance, as well as determine the desired state of performance, ultimately finding the gap between the two, which allows you to create learning content to help your students or your participants go from the current state to the desired state of performance. Well, let's take a quick look at the process to include the different steps. Now, I do want to say that there are many different needs assessment processes and many different needs assessment steps. And as you practice needs assessments, there might be a time where you do one step, skip a step, move steps. So I just want you to be aware that not all needs assessments require everything, and not all needs assessments are done in a certain process. All right, the first step is the identification of the problem. Again, we need to know what the gap is. Usually, you meet with a subject matter expert and they let you know, hey, we see this problem. And so you will be using that as starting information to help you identify the gap. Next up is identification of data sources. What data exists already that will help you understand the situation? After that, you're going to collect data, all the data that pre-existing, and then all the new data. Step 4, a data analysis. So this is where you take all the data you've collected, to include even speaking with that subject matter expert or a manager or somebody in the very first step, and you're going to look at it and see what the data tells you. And then you make recommendations. So what will you recommend to fill this gap in learning? Needs assessment outcomes in you. So what are you going to do when you complete a needs assessment? You're going to find the gap. You're going to create learning experiences to fill that gap. You're also going to consider future direction. And by that, I mean, did your learning experience fill the gap 100%? Did it fill it 50%? What else is needed to get your students or learners or participants to that desired state? Is it a new gap that happened when you filled the old gap? So there's a lot of things to think about for your future direction. You can also think, oh, I met this gap. So what is next? Do I want to have 101 course, which was filling the gap, and 102, which is a little more advanced? So you're just going to have to think about that when you're thinking of recommendations and how you're going to continue to move forward, or if your gap is and your learning experience is a one and done. So another thing I want to share is that you want to make the most of time, your time and learners' time, by really thinking about best practices in working with a subject matter expert, best practices in data analysis or gathering data. Think about best practices on the future direction, and you're going to want to make sure that your learning experiences meet best practices. You don't want to create a 3-hour-long training and everyone goes to the training and they go back to work or to do something and they don't know how to do it. Think about making the most of time, both for you and your learners, to create a learning experience that meets everyone's needs. All right, so this is the end of this video. In our next video, we're going to delve a little bit deeper into the needs assessment process.